What's up guys, welcome to Tipsy Goat. My name is Wesley and today I'll be covering Hazel of the Rootbloom in this new deck tech video. Hazel of the Rootbloom is an awesome Squirrel commander. Not only does she let her tap our tokens for mana, we can also at the end step choose a token and get a copy of it. But if we choose a Squirrel, we even get 2 copies. So how would we build Hazel of the Rootbloom? Well, I've built it as a Squirrel tribal deck, but I've also added in a lot of pingers. This makes it so that either we swing and do damage to our opponents, or if our opponents think we're too much of a threat and wipe our board, we'll still do a lot of ping damage of our creatures dying and maybe even get some life. Ideally, before we drop Hazel, we want to make sure that we either have a Squirrel on board or some other tokens like food tokens, so we can at least utilize either her first and or her second ability. From that point onwards, it's all about making sure our tribe gets big, meaning a lot of Squirrels on board, a lot of auras on board to buff the Squirrels, and then looking for one of those finishing pieces. Before we go any further, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok and Discord. If we would have to choose some key pieces, it would be Roaming Throne and Crater of Behemoth. Roaming Throne because it doubles our commander's end step ability, and Crater Hoof because it's just such a general amazing finisher for tribal decks. But also our pingers are pretty good in this deck, so I would really recommend always trying to have one in hand or on board, because when your board gets big and either you get board wiped, it doesn't matter because you'll still dish out a lot of damage, and it will also make sure that opponents will think twice or 3 times before they wipe the board, because if you have, let's say, 10 Squirrels on board and a Cutthroat Pirate, well, I mean, then we have the deck archetype. As you all know, there are a few kind of archetypes. It's aggro, control, and combo, but there's also something called mid-range. Now, I would like to classify this deck as a aggro to mid-range kind of deck. We really especially want to go early with little Squirrels and just buff them to the mid game, and then really want to close out the game before our opponents with control decks can really get the hand of the game with multiple board wipes, etc. This deck has 8 ramp pieces in it. All the big green staples basically are in there, such as Skyshard Claim, Cultivate, Rampant Growth, Cryptolith Rite. We only want a certain limited amount of removal. In this deck we have 4 pieces. Best Infestation is a great card here as removal because we can exit, meaning we can remove multiple artifacts or enchantments, and we also get a lot of tokens in return for it, which will give us life when they die. In total we have 21 token generators in this deck. They are split between some creatures, artifacts, enchantments, but these all either make tokens or they double tokens, such as Doubling Season. We need many token generators because our commander really works well if we do get the tokens, so we never want to have too little of it in case we don't draw it. To complement all the Squirrel tokens that we're making, and since it's a tribal deck, we've got a lot of aura cards in there. Aura cards are cards that buff our Squirrels or our creatures with +1/+1, +2/+2, sometimes even +5/+5, and in Coat of Arms it can even go as wild as +20/+20 if you have enough Squirrels. Now, of course, we also need a way to get to all the good cards in our deck. This is why we have 7 pieces of card draw in this deck. It's not the most I've played in a deck, but I feel like it's consistent enough that you always have 1 or 2 pieces at least by turn 4. From this card draw section, I want to give a special shout out to Plum the Forbidden, because let's say you have a big and wide board and your opponent wipes it. You can keep some mana open to sack all your creatures, giving you an immense card draw and also making sure you tick some of their opponent's life off. It's just an all-around great card in a deck. Now, if a game gets hard or we can't really swing, we have different ways of winning. Since we're tribal, one of the ways obviously is by going wide and big and just slapping our opponents, but the other way is with the pingers I've included in this deck. These pingers are cards like Vindictive Vampire, Zulaport Cutthroat, Nadier's Nightblade, Mirkwood Bats, Marionette Apprentice. These cards will make sure that when we get blocked or when our opponents wipe our board, or we have some sack spells in our deck, as mentioned before, we can just dish out a lot of damage without the necessity of us hitting our players directly in the face. We only run 1 board wipe in this deck because we don't always want to board wipe and would rather have our opponents board wipe us than we do it ourselves. But we've included Meathook Massacre because if it comes to the fact that our opponents are actually ahead of us on board, we can wipe it with Meathook Massacre. And then we run 1 piece of protection, which is in this case Heroic Intervention. Why not more, you ask? Well, it kind of depends on what your goal is. Since I've included so much pingers that actually do benefit when our creatures die, I didn't want to go overly aggressive on the protection. So now for the deck. First of all, we have our auras. We have Squirrel Sovereign, which is just an all-around great 1/1 aura for only 2 mana. Same goes for Sylvan Antrim. Since our Squirrel tokens are green, this will buff them nicely. And also, whenever a green creature enters, which Squirrel tokens are, we get to scry. Adaptive Automation is also a great card. Why? Because it's not included in every tribal deck. Why? Because you could choose which creature type you want, and then all of those creatures get buffed +1/+1. We have Beastmaster Ascension in here, obviously. Why? Because it's very easy for us to get 6-7 tokens on board, and then with one swing we'll automatically, before combat, even buff them to 7/7. Because Beastmaster Ascension said, whenever a creature attacks, and it doesn't say when it deals combat damage, so as soon as we just attack with 7, it'll instantly get the 7 counters on it, and we'll just get 5/5/5/5 on all our scrolls. Chitter Spitter is also a great card. For every time we sacrifice a token, we get an Acorn counter, and then for every Acorn counter on Chitter Spitter, we get +1/+1. Door of Destinies and Coat of Arms, also great cards, especially in tribal decks. Coat of Arms can easily make our scrolls like +10/+10. For our creatures, we have a lot. We have 29. I'm not going to mention all of them here, because you'll be able to find the deck in the description below. But there are some which definitely pop out, and we'll take a look at those. We have the new card Valley Rot Caller, which is an amazing card in this deck. Why? Because we're like I said, we're going to go wide, and then whenever we swing with this creature, depending on the number of scrolls we have, we'll be able to get a lot of life and deal a lot of life through this ability. Camellia is also a great scroll in this deck. Especially since it gives all our squirrels menace, which make them harder to block. And she also has a built-in tool to sacrifice and gain tokens. Then, of course, we have Shadowfang in here. I don't have to tell you why it's in here. It's just a great card in this deck, doubling our tokens whenever one would be created. And we can also buff one of our scrolls with the secondary ability if we wish to do so. 2 more creatures worth mentioning are the 2 Hermits in this deck. Both of them cost 5 mana. We have Deep Forest Hermit and we have Deranged Hermit. Both of these will come into play making 4 tokens, 4 scroll tokens I must say. And then also the scrolls have +1/+1. In this deck, since we're kind of low mana cost, we're not running that much land. We're just running 34 pieces. By all means, you can tweak this land base as you want. I kind of wanted to keep it on a normal budget number, so to speak. So guys, that concludes today's deck tech video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And also follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Discord. This was Wesley from Tipsy Go. Tipsy out.